Are you learning or know one language and are wondering when you can start learning another one? Thinking about potentially learning two languages at the same time and wondering how you should go about it or if you should? In this video, I'm going to talk about learning multiple languages, maintaining them, and also how to make it so they don't all get mixed up. So let's make sure to go into a couple mistakes that people make when trying to learn or maintain multiple languages to make sure you don't do the same thing. Hey, I'm Genevieve from Breakout and Speak, trying to help you make language learning more fun. So let's get into it. First of all, if you're watching this video, congratulations, go you. That means you want to learn multiple languages, which is awesome. It means you're ambitious. So how should you go about it? The first mistake that people sometimes make when working on different languages at the same time is learn similar content in both languages at the same time. So I have a friend that was learning German and Japanese at the same time. And in terms of language families, German and Japanese are not similar. You would think it would be an easy distinction and pretty obvious when a word is German versus when it's Japanese, right? The problem is if both languages are still on the newer side before they become more solid, your brain thinks in terms of this is a language that I know, such as my native language, and then there's the new language. So when prompted with something, for example, house or talking about your house, your brain will try to scramble to find whatever is new, and it might go Japanese, it might go German. And the problem with that is that you start to have trouble separating them until the languages get stronger. So how do you avoid this confusion? It really helps to get to an intermediate level in one language first. Beginner intermediate is okay because then you'll be working with different content. In the beginning, intro phrases, daily conversations, these sorts of topics will be different from the sort of topics and content that you're learning about and the intermediate stage. So naturally, it becomes an easier separation when you are dealing with two different types of content and not working on the same thing in the same time. But what about you? What languages are you learning or want to learn, and how's it going? Let me know in the comments. Another big mistake that I made is when I was trying to learn 3 languages at the same time, I did them all back to back, which gets us into our next mistake that people make is they do their language learning at the same time of day. Understand if you have schedule restraints, but if you can, it is way better to separate your languages into time of day. Because if you do one language and then immediately after start working on another one, it starts to erase the things you did in the first one and make it less likely for you to be able to hold on. Now, if it is impossible to do that, try to at least take a little break in between. So should you learn 2 languages or more at the same time? Let me get into the pluses and minuses so you can make the best decision for you. So I have a friend that is learning multiple languages at the same time, and they say that the positive is they know that they're eventually going to know both of the languages. They can enjoy both of the languages and feel like they're learning different things, and it helps sometimes to switch things up and not just focus on one. So hey, that can be great. But something you really want to watch out for is if you only have a set amount of language learning time and you have to split it among different languages, that means your progress in the languages will be slower. And if that's something that's demotivating to you, that you can't yet feel like you can communicate in that language, it's something to keep in mind. Because when you get to that point, it really helps your motivation and makes you feel like you want to keep going. Now, this is more of a know yourself kind of thing. If it's your first time learning another language, I would really encourage you just to stick to one. Because as you learn languages, you learn how you like to learn and how to learn one better. So trying to figure that out with different languages at the same time, it's actually really much better to focus on one, get to the intermediate level, and then you can start thinking about adding more on. Don't forget, if you already know another language or multiple, then you also want to try to maintain the other languages that you know. And the more that you know, the more you have to maintain. But actually, when you get to a more advanced levels, this doesn't become hard work. It becomes fun. Actually, you just live, you watch movies, it's not a big deal. But in the beginning, when you're learning, it takes more of a concentrated effort. So when should you start learning another language? I would recommend getting to an intermediate level first with whichever language you're working on. At least beginner intermediate, preferably strong intermediate. Because if the language is stronger, then it's more solid and it's way less likely to get them mixed up. The content will be different. The topics of conversation will be different. The language that is already stronger have deeper connections so that the new one becomes the new thing and the language that you already have becomes even more solid as you go along and you're able to keep them separate. But what about two languages from the same language family, such as Spanish and Portuguese that share some similarities? In this case, I would wait a little bit longer for one language to get stronger before trying to add on the second one. Don't forget, it's actually normal to sometimes mix up languages, especially if they're new. But do know that it gets way easier as you go along and the languages get stronger. So what if you want to learn multiple languages and you're not sure which one to pick and focus on right now? Well, first of all, that's ambitious and pretty awesome of you. It's also awesome to be working on one language. So either way, it's a win-win. At the end of the day, if you really want to, you can try both, explore both. And it might be surprising which one you end up feeling more attached to or which one feels right for the moment. And don't feel guilty if it's not the right thing to work on multiple languages at the same time. Push pause, come back to it later, focus on one. That's okay too. Way back in the early days of Duolingo, when it was one of the first mainstream apps for language learning and free, I thought, wow, this is awesome. Look at all these languages you can learn. I wanted to learn a bunch. So I started learning French, Italian, and Portuguese all at the same time because I wanted to learn those languages. Terrible idea. Don't do that. There were two things wrong with that. First of all, they're all Romance languages, and even more so, they were all teaching the same or very similar content. So the same sorts of words, same sorts of phrases. So as much as some of them sounded different, your brain is going to have a really hard time trying to separate all these new things into their appropriate categories. So what ended up happening with my learn 3 languages at the same time adventure? Nothing. I ended up dropping all of them. It was getting confused and it was too hard to maintain. But then after learning how to learn a language way better, so I started learning some French, put that on pause. Later on, I started learning Portuguese, ended up taking that to fluency, check, before then switching gears and focusing on Italian. So at the end of the day, it all worked out. And so it really depends on you, your goals, the time that you have, the different languages, and mainly where you are in your language learning journey. So if you follow the tips that I gave you, you definitely will be able to maintain, learn multiple languages. Go you, you're awesome. So stick around, subscribe for more language learning tips on how to make learning a language more fun and how to get out in the world and speak. So happy language learning, multiple languages today, and catch you soon.